It's the Paul Harrell program. We're broadcasting from the 91st General Assembly at the Marble Palace, as we like to call it. Welcome to the program. We've got Mr. Anthony Roulette with us. He's with the National Rifle Association. Anthony, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Paul. It's great to be here.
All right, so what happened? Obviously, let's just set this scenario up. You tell me if you disagree with this.
Okay.
So your colleague, is it Chris Cox? Is
Chris
that his
Cox,
name?
Yeah, well,
so,
more than my colleague. My boss.
Your
my
boss.
Big boss.
So your boss, he stood up there with the governor last week on a bill that the NRA supported. It was a messy process. We can talk about that at another time. For this campus carry, enhanced concealed carry license. And, the governor gets credit for that, and he signs the bill. And in that same press conference, Jonathan Dismang starts to talk about, well, we've got a piece of legislation that we're, going to exempt this and that. Fast forward a week, you guys don't support this new legislation because it undoes some of what was done last week.
Right.
Is that an accurate description?
Yeah, I mean, the ink was barely dry on the governor's signature when the push started to basically undermine a lot of the key provisions of 1249. We just had huge problems with it. And it wasn't just a matter of the policy issues. The legislation was very poorly drafted. It had flaws, it had issues, it had problems. We looked at it with the eye we're supposed to look at, which is to protect our membership and to protect law-abiding gun owners. And we saw the potential for misinterpretation because of the way it was drafted to go far beyond what they said was its intent, which was addressing the athletic stadiums issue and some carry issues at UAMS. We at some point it's possible we might have been able to work with them on cleaning up that language, but we ran into so many roadblocks and so much difficulty in just trying to get the language correct, and eventually the door just shut on that. We weren't able to get in our input. We came out strongly opposed to it because again, the language was very badly flawed. Again, from a policy standpoint, ideologically, it had its own problems. But just the way it was crafted and drafted, because they were rushing to get it through, it was a wreck.
Wow. So the door closed. I mean, so describe that. I mean, there was in the past a willingness to work. You guys were working together, and then all of a sudden it just the parties involved said, no, we don't want to do anything else?
That's kind of what it seemed like. I mean, we had been discussing for a while some of the issues, and they agreed with us that there were potential problems. They also told us that they would make sure that interpretation of these areas would not go beyond the intent. We just can't trust everybody to act that way. We need to make sure if we're going to not even put our seal of approval on something, but accept language that is going to be codified into law, make sure it's right.
Yeah.
Make sure it's done correctly.
There's 76 Republicans in that chamber.
Yep.
And they just passed this bill undoing part of what they did last week with, what was it, 68 votes or 58 votes? I can't remember.
It was there were some paired votes. I think the actual tally was 71 because of the paired votes.
Yeah,
so 68 on the board.
Yeah. I mean, is that strange to you? I mean, you said you work in the Carolinas as well.
Yeah.
I mean, is that strange to you to have this many Republicans kind of go against what the NRA is saying? Hey, well, guys, pump the brakes.
Yes, it is, and it's strange. It's strange for it to be in Arkansas or either of the Carolinas. Republicans in all three states tend to be solidly pro-gun people, and there were a lot of folks on the floor today speaking in favor of a flawed anti-gun bill and voting for a flawed anti-gun bill. And I can only presume that was because leadership in the Republican Party on both the Senate and House side, as well as the governor's office, were pushing hard for it.
I know this is a tough question to answer, but I'm going to ask it. Did we get to this point because of the governor's previous association with the NRA? Did that have any bearing? You guys have worked with him in the past, and so maybe you think, hey, let's try to work with him again this time.
No, I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think for example, with 1249, which was really a good bill. I mean, it started. That was a rough process too, obviously. I'm sure you watched how that thing worked out.
I did, yeah. I mean, it was interesting, because there were 16 hours additional training that you guys didn't support one week, and then 8 hours of additional training next week, and you guys were on board. I thought that was confusing to me. I mean, I know they subtracted it a little bit, but
they subtracted it, but it was a little bit more than that too. I mean, it's up to 8 hours of additional training, but you can subtract up to 5 hours of that if you've got a previous, 4 hours of that if you've got a carry permit already and you've gone through that training program. So in reality, to get this enhanced permit, it would be an additional 4 hours of training. And what that does is opens the door to a lot of places. Here, as you say, the Marble Palace in particular, and many government buildings. Again, the issue with 724 right now is athletic events. College campuses, of course, public colleges and universities. So the process of 1249 was worked very carefully with the governor, and we got along very well with Asa Hutchinson on that. And I think the final product was a good product. I think it advanced gun rights in Arkansas, and especially for those who like the carry permit.
He called it a privilege, though. He stood up there and called it a Second Amendment privilege. I was kind of like, ugh. I had a terrible reaction.
Some folks sometimes don't get the terminology correct at times, and maybe that has some indication of where their mindset is. But obviously, it's a right to us. It's a right to anybody who believes in the Second Amendment, and it's unfortunate that you have to sometimes go through the process of kind of asking the government for permission to exercise that right. We're going to be back in 2019. For the legislative session, and our primary goal there is going to be permitless carry, and we are going to be pushing hard for that.
Let me ask you this last question: when I watch Republicans, and we've had issues with Republicans, not just with gun rights, but with not wanting to end welfare or put better restrictions on it, get spending under control, a lot of conservative issues. The only thing I can think is primaries. And now with the Second Amendment issue, I mean, that's a huge issue. Does the NRA ever get involved in primaries?
Oh, we get involved in primaries all the time.
I think that should echo loudly around the Capitol. So.
Yes, we plan to be very active in 2018 in Arkansas, and we hope that we can bring a legislature to Little Rock that will be more supportive of our gun rights.
Mr. Anthony Roulette, I appreciate you coming on, sir. Thank
My
you so
pleasure,
much.
Paul.
Folks, we're going to take a break. We're going to be right back. More with former State Representative Donnie Copeland, and we're going to hear from Josh Waters of Political Strategies. Back in a minute.